Hey folks, welcome back to another episode of the Ruby Rogues podcast. This week I'm your host, Charles Max Wood, and I am talking to Ridhwana Khan from South Africa. Very cool. I've always wanted to go down there and see different areas down there. But anyway, you gave a talk at Rails World. You talked about a whole bunch of the internals on Ruby on Rails, and it looks like you also help write the Rails guides, which is awesome. That's one of the nicest things about Rails is when I'm talking to people and it's like, well, how do I even get started? It's like, they've got these great guides, just go spend a half hour or so with them, and then you're pretty much off to the races. So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself as far as anything else you want people to know about you, why you're popular, famous, and all that stuff.
Yeah, so I'm Ridwana. Like you mentioned, I'm a technical writer for the Rails Foundation. I've been helping to improve the official Ruby on Rails guides for the last year or so. I'm also a lead engineer at a company called Circle, where I focus on building tools that empower creators and communities. I have about over a decade of experience in software development. Over my career, I've worked mostly within the Ruby on Rails space as well as JavaScript. I think if I had to sum up the things that I'm passionate about, it would be making code more accessible through documentation, and that's why I write the Ruby on Rails guides. Thoughtful engineering and just inclusive community building, which is why I work at Circle, because they are community building platform. And I've built many communities over my career. I try to build communities where I see a gap. So the most obvious one is sort of the woman in tech gap. So over my career, I've built communities like Women in Tech. I've built Rails Girls in South Africa, Rails Bridge, Black Girls Code, Ladies That UX, which is the intersection of development and user experience. So just really passionate in that space. And on a personal note, if I'm not coding, I'm trying to keep an eye on my ever-growing collection of houseplants and trying to keep them alive. They're constantly dying. I also really enjoy traveling and going to speak at conferences. It's one of my favorite things to do. And finally, just hanging out with my very opinionated feline peer programmers or per programmers, Zoe and Zeus. If you watch my talk at Rails World, you've seen some really goofy photos of them. Yeah, that's basically me.
Very cool. So I have used Circle before. We used it I tried to set up a community for the podcasts, and I tried it out. So yeah, that's cool. I didn't know they were a Rails shop. So
yeah. And before Circle, I was at Dev.to, also known as Forum, also a community platform. So I've just been moving around community platforms recently.
Right. Yeah, I was going to say I'm detecting a trend. So I am curious as we dive in, right? Because I think a lot of times when we talk to people, it's, oh, you're doing this very cool thing with code. And I'm sure you do cool things with code. I'm not trying to say you don't. But the thing that's interesting to me is I think a lot of people don't really think about, okay, what goes into the documentation, what goes into the Rails guides and things like that. And I'm curious, how did you get involved there? Did you just, I don't know, go tell the foundation, hey, you need to fix these, or I don't know, what happened there?
No, I think around last year, I want to say around January 2024, Amanda from the Rails Foundation was actually looking for writers to work on the Rails Foundation Ruby on Rails guides. And so they put out a post to say they're looking for 2 freelance writers to work on the Ruby on Rails guides. And during that time, I was sort of between different gigs, and I'd been using the Ruby on Rails guides a lot. And so I decided, why not? Let me apply and see how it goes. And I started writing for the Rails Foundation myself and another writer, Boomi. We started off and we worked with a couple of other people to review the guides, and that's how it all got started.
Very cool. So is that paid, or are you doing it because you love
Yeah.
us? Both.
I
Okay.
mean, I'm doing it because I love y'all and I love the guides and I love what
Right.
I do, but it is also paid.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, I guess I hadn't really thought too much about it, but now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, oh wow. So are
Yeah.
there, because the guides have been around for a while, are there any new guides, or is it mostly just updating what was already there?
So initially we started with updating what was there, but when Rails 8 got released, we had a couple of new guides that we needed to implement, and we'd done that
Mm-hmm.
as with the release. So it's a combination of both. We look at the old guides, we audit them, we see what needs to be updated, and we update them. But then we also, as Rails releases new features, we go in and we create new guides. Also, if contributors create PRs for new features, sometimes that means we go through the pull requests and we update the guides with new information or new sections.
Gotcha. So how much time are you spending every week working on the guides?
So we put a pause a little bit recently as the new year started, but I'll be picking it up again later this month. I spend around, I want to say, I forget the actual number of hours because we've put a pause on it for the last 3 months and we're just starting again. But I think it's around 20 hours a week. I stand to be
Okay.
corrected. It's been a while.
Uh-huh. That makes sense. And what's the
Yeah.
process? So I guess the
So
process is different if you're auditing versus writing new ones. But yeah, what does the process look like?
yeah, so I mean, I don't do a lot of auditing. We have a specific contributor that helps with the auditing. So Patrick Hosh, he does the
Mm-hmm.
auditing of the guides and a lot of the reviewing of the guides. But essentially, what he does is he comes in, he audits them, he checks which ones we need to update, and then once he's audited it, we use Basecamp and we basically keep track of which guides need updating. Then one of the
Mm-hmm.
writers will go in, they'll look at the existing guides. Patrick will already have some notes in on what he thinks can be improved. We look at it with fresh eyes. We then decide what can be improved from our side. Sometimes that's how I started diving into the source code. I dive into the source code, see how the internals work, because I feel that if you really understand how the internals of Rails works, then you're able to explain the things better.
Mm-hmm.
Once that's done, we send out a PR. It goes through internal review first within our team. Once internal review is done, we then create a PR for the open source community to be able to review the guides. Maybe they pick up some areas or gaps that we may have missed. And then finally, we merge it.
Very cool. So, are they in the Rails repo, or are they somewhere else?
Yeah, so they're in the Rails repo, and usually we encourage open source contributors to have a look through them. The guides are marked with a label RF docs, and it has a label. Sorry, the in the title we usually have a prefix RF docs, and then it has a label Rails Foundation. So
Mm-hmm.
if you're trying to find any of the docs, you can do that. And we really encourage the Rails community to review them, because it means that if you're learning Rails, or even if you've been using Rails for a long time, you basically know where some of the gaps lie, what you've struggled with, and when you review them, you can bring some of that fresh perspectives to our PRs.
Right. Makes sense. So yeah, I'm curious, how deep into the internals have you gotten? Because I mean, your talk was a half hour, so you didn't get too deep into things, but it sounds like you spend a bit of time looking at how Rails is actually put together under the hood.
Yeah. I think, I mean, depending on what guide I'm writing at the time, I then dive into the internals, and sometimes it requires a deeper dive, sometimes it doesn't. I feel like when you're writing documentation, it's not really enough just to describe what a method does on a surface. You need to understand how it works, why it behaves the
Mm-hmm.
way it does. And that's taken me to some of the more complex parts of Rails code base. So, for example, in the talk, I talk about MIME types. I've traced through how Rails handles the different MIME types using
Mm-hmm.
method missing. I've done I've dug really deep into active record associations because that's a very big part of Rails as well when you're writing applications. So things like the definitions of the dynamic methods and so on.
Mm-hmm.
I've looked at, I think I mentioned in the talk as well as validations. So Rails uses like the dynamic callbacks, things like that. I've dove into some parts like that. Um, and I think that the most common pattern is just the meta programming aspect of it, right? So trying to find
Right.
those patterns across the different parts of Rails or components in Rails and then trying to understand it a little bit better. The Rails code base is really huge and there's like always more to learn.
Right.
But the magic is beginning to feel a little bit less like magic as you start
Mm-hmm.
understanding more of it.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like we've talked to different people about metaprogramming on this podcast over the years. And so, yeah, a lot of what you put up there was like, I was like, oh, I see how that works. Um, and yeah, so I can kind of get the idea that, yeah, it feels a whole lot less magic and a whole lot more, oh, this is a tool that we used. And,
Yeah.
and so it's able to, for example, when it's defining methods, using define method, right? It just puts things in place. It does the work. And one thing I hadn't thought of with the mime type is you define the method and then you just call it. I was like, oh, that makes sense. So yeah, I really liked that and really liked just the clean approach to explaining how all this stuff works.
Yeah, I think the main aspect really, and again, I have to emphasize, it's the patterns. It's Rails is a lot of magic, but once you identify some of the patterns and once you understand how meta programming works, you sort of start
Mm-hmm.
fitting these puzzle pieces together and you're able to understand the code a lot better. And then you'll see with the different components, there'll be one pattern here and then it's applied in this different place. And what I try to also do within the talk is show how those patterns are applied across the different components. So
Mm-hmm.
if you understood it in one component, you can go and dive into a different component and it has very similar patterns.
Right.
And once you think of it like that, it feels a lot more approachable. Because when I started off in Rails, and even like up until a few years ago, I there was all this magic happening in Rails. So when you reach a point of like, hey, I'm doing this thing, but it's a little bit more complex, and now Rails isn't playing nicely with me, you don't
Mm-hmm.
really know where to go from there. But
Right.
if you try reading the source code or you try looking into how Rails is actually working, you're able to move past that like blocking point and do more complex things. I mean, ideally, you don't want to break away from the magic. But
Right.
unfortunately, the reality of it is when you build complex applications, you end up needing more tools under your belt. And I feel like
Mm-hmm.
understanding the code base is a tool under your belt.
Yeah, that makes sense. For me, what I found was as I've learned, I learned Rails first, and then the Ruby later. As far as like what all the other things are that Rails kind of makes it so you don't have to deal with right off the bat. Was I would build stuff and then yeah, I would get stuck on something, right? It'd be like, I don't know why it is doing this. Why is it acting this
Yeah.
way? Why is it, doing this thing to whatever it is that I'm trying to work on? And it became pretty apparent once I started to learn Ruby. It was like, oh, it's doing this because Ruby works this way. And so it's
Yeah.
just using the Ruby mechanism to do the thing. And so, yeah, I love that idea of saying, okay, look, go look at the internals. It may be something you haven't done before, but it's not a mystery. It's not complicated or hard. It's just, it's something that maybe you need to learn a little bit more about. And then you look at it and you go, huh, okay, this is where this is coming from. This is why I have this the way that it is.
Yeah. And another aspect of it is that when you go through the Rails code base, you also not only learning about Rails itself, but you potentially learning how to solve problems elegantly, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Rails does solve problems elegantly. And very often when we're working on our features within whatever application or companies we're working for or with, you're solving similar problems in just different use cases or different forms. And so by going through the Rails code base, you're able to also learn problem solving skills.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. So let's talk about some of those skills or some of the things that you've seen in the code base. You kind of went straight to metaprogramming, and I've seen plenty of people over the years basically talk about how metaprogramming is scary, or you can get yourself into trouble with it. I don't know. How do you feel about that argument about using metaprogramming or not?
I think that using meta programming, I think you're going to have a lot of people saying meta programming is the best, and some people saying that you shouldn't use meta programming.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there's a use case for meta programming. Meta programming is a superpower and it can lead to really elegant, expressive code, but it also can lead to very scary and intimidating code that's very hard to follow. So
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate meta programming, but I also respect that it has a lot of complexity and it can make code harder to debug, especially if you're not familiar with the patterns or if it's overused without like clear naming or clear
Mm-hmm.
direction. So I wouldn't say that I feel strongly that everybody should use metaprogramming. I think that metaprogramming needs to be used I think metaprogramming has a place, and depending on your use case, metaprogramming may be a good fit. But if you're using metaprogramming for everything, you may just be overcomplicating things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a fair way to put it. I do a lot of work on like my cars or my house or whatever, and what I
Yeah.
found is that most of the time, just the regular tools work, right? And
Yep.
even if I pull out the power tools, right, they work. But occasionally, I've got to open up a wall with a saw, or I've got to use some other tool that, yeah, may have some safety hazard to it or something if you're not using it properly. And that's the way I think about metaprogramming is you don't want to take more out of the wall than you have to, so to speak. You don't you have to be careful not to hurt yourself with it. Sometimes the code can be hard to debug when you're using metaprogramming, and so yeah, what I find is most of the time when I'm reaching for something like metaprogramming, I am doing something on the level of Rails, right? And so what I'm doing is I'm actually
Yeah.
using it to provide myself with the pattern I want to see in my code. And so that winds up being in like the lib folder, or somewhere else where it's not code that I'm going to go touch all the time, and it's not
Yeah.
code that I'm using to solve all my major problems. What I'm doing is I'm just basically using the metaprogramming to create a better tool for me to solve the problem.
Yeah. And I think your example, by the way, was great about how you do work around DIY work around the house, and sometimes you need to bring out the right tools. In my talk, I talk about like a real world use case where we use meta programming, which I think is really valuable. So when I was working at Dev.to, or known as Forum as
Mm-hmm.
well, we were building, of course, community software, and we needed a way during onboarding to let different communities define custom profile fields for their members.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, in the talk, I used the example of a gardening community. And for a gardening community during onboarding, we may want a profile field that a user can enter their favorite plant, or a developer
Mm-hmm.
community might ask if you're available for hire. So these fields need to be highly customizable, and they might need to be dynamically added at runtime. They also might support different data types like strings,
Mm-hmm.
booleans, dates, etc. So rather than hard coding a bunch of different profile attributes that are different for different communities, we used metaprogramming to dynamically define getters and setters for the custom fields as the communities created them. And it meant that communities could define as many custom fields as they want, and the system would just respond. There were no like migrations or extra model code or no like hardwired logic. It just made the system really
Mm-hmm.
flexible. And I feel like that's a great example of how meta programming is used in a real practical way to solve a problem. But like you
Yep.
say, I feel like there are very like meta programming in my career. I think that's probably like one of the very few cases I've needed to use meta programming,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe there's like one or two others. But over 10 years, you're mostly building standard applications that don't necessarily require that level of customization.
Right. Yep. Absolutely. So, what other things have you found going back to Rails internals? What other things have you found that maybe you wanted to add to the talk but didn't have time, or have thought were interesting that people don't really see or know in the Rails code base?
Um, I think there's so many gems, no pun intended, in the Rails code base. One of the things that I really enjoy about like exploring the Rails internals is seeing how thoughtfully things are architected. So when you like how it gives you a whole ecosystem of dynamic methods, how things are named really well. So just very thoughtful processes, very thoughtful naming. Also, how the different components are well separated. Things like how well the code is documented. I think that's really a superpower. If you go through the Rails code base, you'll find sort of method definitions. You'll find how the Rails API documentation is within the code base, and you can see what the different methods are doing.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's a lot of sort of other practices that the Rails team uses within their sort of actual development. And I found a lot of those useful alongside the meta programming aspect and
Mm-hmm.
the great architecture. I also think,
Very
sorry, one
cool.
more thing to add there, like the PR, I found that when I'm writing documentation, I also sometimes tend to go through like the open issues or pull requests
Mm-hmm.
to see, did someone touch on this? Maybe there's something I don't really understand and I want to understand it better, but maybe the Rails code base doesn't provide as much information. I find that when I go through pull request reviews or even issues, contributors and the core team are very verbose about explaining things. They do a really great job about articulating themselves and working together to form a solution. So it's
Mm-hmm.
really nice to go through pull requests, to go through issues. And I really encourage people to just, if you're not contributing to Rails or you're not reviewing documentation PRs or even just normal Rails code, like just browsing the issues and the pull requests casually can provide a ton of information and useful knowledge.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. So, do you have any advice for people? Let's say that somebody. I mean, I have to admit I haven't really contributed to Rails. I think I've filed bugs. I think I've maybe put in one pull request in my whole life against Rails. So if somebody wants to get involved and they're sitting there and they're thinking, okay, well, I just want to understand it, and maybe they want to contribute to the docs, or maybe they, just want to understand things better, and maybe help with some little thing here or there. Like, where do you recommend that people start with the Rails code base to just understand what's going on in there?
Yeah, I feel like I get so excited when someone asks me this question. I'm biased, but I feel like starting with documentation is a really good way to get into contributing to Rails or just understanding things better. Rails places a lot of value on clear, accessible documentation. So if you're reading a guide or an API document and something's confusing or missing, just open up a PR to improve it, to add value to the next person. You don't need to be a core contributor to that. You don't need to be writing the guides to do that. You just need to be someone who wants to make it clearer for the next person reading the guides. And especially, I feel like a lot of people that are new to the industry or that feel they don't have enough knowledge to contribute to Rails or something or the other. That's how I felt for a long time. I feel like documentation is a clear way to contribute, because if you're not understanding something in the documentation, I can guarantee you there's hundreds of other people that are not understanding
Yep.
it as well. Another way to get yourself familiar with the Rails code base, if you're looking to just dive a little bit deeper, I think read the tests. They incredibly instructive. So the Rails test suite is massive, but it's very descriptive. It shows you how methods are supposed to behave. It often gives you breadcrumbs to trace back to the source code. And when you're trying to understand something, or if you're thinking of fixing a bug, tests are often the best entry point, and writing or improving tests or just reading the tests is a fantastic way to start. And then if you're looking actively to contribute, you can look for a good first issue, or you can look, like I mentioned, the docs tag. The Rails GitHub repo is very well organized. So there's very often open issues that are labeled as like a good first issue, or where we need contributions on the documentations. And finally, like, don't be afraid to read the source code. Even if you don't understand it, that's fine. Just a lot of reading of it, eventually your mind starts to put the pieces together. It's like the more you read, the more somehow your mind just like connects different parts of it. You start seeing patterns emerge. There's lots of tools as well that I mentioned in my talk, on like things that will help you to navigate the Rails source code better. So use some of those tools to navigate the Rails source code. And finally, you don't have to do it alone. There are so many people in the Rails community who are so kind and supportive and willing to help. So whether it's in Rails Slack or Discord or GitHub discussions, you can ask questions and you can get unstuck. I think the main thing, finally, to wrap it all up, is that Rails, contributing to Rails, isn't really about being perfect or knowing everything. It's about just being curious and wanting to make Rails better, even if it's in small ways.
Awesome. All right. Well, I'm just trying to think where else we go from here. Are there things that you want to add or change or bring forward with the Rails documentation, or areas that it wish it dove into that it doesn't?
I think there's a couple of places where we could improve the documentation. There's a couple of guides, and I'm whipping up the guides as we speak, so bear with me as I do this. There's a couple of guides which I think could really use some improvement, and we've got them noted. So for instance, one of the ones that I'm hoping to work on within this year is the active record query interface. It's a really big
Hmm.
guide. I think it's in a good start. It's in a good place, but I think there could also be a lot of improvements. We could explain things a lot better. We could maybe move out sections, make them smaller, more approachable sections.
Hmm.
I think it's one of the biggest guides. And so I think just breaking it up into smaller, more digestible pieces will make it a little bit more approachable. There's also some other sections that could use some improvement. I think we're already in a, I think the Rails guides in general is one of the better guides we have out there across languages. I think the Rails Foundation has been doing an amazing job. But there are just individual ones that are work in progress. So, like the Rails initialization process, that's a work in progress, as well as like the active support instrumentation,
Hmm.
things like active record encryption. So, the first thing we want to do is we want to finalize those work in progress guides. Because they may have right now not like the full picture of what that topic encompasses. So we just want
Hmm.
to fill out that information and cover the bases. And then we'll go about improving some of the other guides and breaking them down. But we're hoping to achieve a lot this year and improve it significantly, as well as create some new guides that haven't been covered with Rails 8.
Hmm. Yeah, there are a lot of things that I see you can do with Rails 8, or I mean, even some of the stuff that came out in Rails 7 that
Yeah.
aren't super well documented, right? And I see people use them and they do amazing things with them, and it's like, man, why hasn't anyone really just broken this down? So, yeah, I'm looking forward to some of that. Um,
Yeah.
so I'm a little curious. I want to kind of switch over to both Cape Town and to Circle. So what do you do at Circle exactly? Like, do you work on a specific part of the platform, or do you just kind of hit whatever needs to be hit? And by the way, I'll just explain because I've used Circle, and what I find is if
Mhm.
you work at a place, you kind of look at it differently from the way that people look at it sometimes. So Circle is essentially a forum. You can think of it as kind of a focused Facebook. It kind of feels like that, Facebook group. And then on top of that, you can add like courses and other things to your community. You can set it up as a paid community or a free community, and yeah, it's a really well put together system. So yeah, so what kinds of things do you work on there, and yeah, what kinds of concerns or improvements do you find at work?
Yeah, so Circle is a really established, well written product. We have some really big communities using it, and it's one of the companies that I've worked for that is constantly improving and always looking to better the product. And it's very exciting because they constantly building new features, but also improving the features that exist in the application itself. So specifically, I work on what we call the email hub or marketing hub team at
Mm-hmm.
Circle. And we basically responsible for things like email broadcasting and sort of that domain, whereby you're able to send broadcasts to either community members or what we call contacts within the system or leads.
Mm-hmm.
And there's just a lot of things that tie into it. So, for example, analytics, and that ties into things like workflows, where, for instance, when you onboard a community, you might want to send a broadcast and then we might want to wait for 5 days and send them a follow up, things like that. It's a
Mm-hmm.
relatively new team at Circle. I think we launched the email hub slash marketing hub feature last year. I want to say around September, October. It was around Rails World time.
Hmm.
So it's relatively new. We're actually hiring for the team at the moment. So I'm leading the team, and we have 2 engineers, and we're looking to hire another 2 engineers for the team. So I've been doing lots of interviews and hiring at the moment. Our tech stack is Ruby on Rails, and we use JavaScript as well. It's a pretty big engineering team, so each sort of sub engineering team is focused on a particular part of the platform. So we have like a CRM team and a CMS team, and you sort of focus on a specific domain.
Hmm. Very cool. Yeah, I just got hired at Prize Picks, and so I've been got we're seeing some of this stuff, and I'm on the growth team where we it's kind of your traditional R&D where we come up
Yeah.
with ideas on what we could do better and then go and invent it and see if it works. But yeah, I love what you're talking about where it's the growth. That's always exciting to see companies growing, and then just constantly looking for that level of improvement. Those are the best companies to work at. So if
Yeah,
people want to apply, how do they do it?
we are on, we have, if you go on the Circle website, you should see a careers. Yes, a careers link, and you can view the open roles, and you can find the role for a senior full stack engineer on the
Hmm.
Marketing Hub team, and you can apply through there. It's very
Awesome.
exciting. You'll be working with me. So please apply. It's also a fully remote opportunity,
Hmm.
which is nice. Those are rare and few nowadays.
Yeah. So you're based in Cape Town. Is your team like
Yes.
all over the world, or?
Yeah. So we have developers from pretty much all over the world. We in the Marketing Hub team right now, it's myself, and then we have 2 developers in India, and we're hoping to hire someone in a European time zone, and then maybe sort of North America, just so that we have that
Mhm.
full time zone support, but
Right.
also ensuring that we're not too far apart, that we can't collaborate when we need to. So maybe like with a 1 hour or 2 hour overlap, just in case we need some sync time. So
Hmm.
that gives us sort of good collaboration across the board. But for the most part, we use async tools like Slack and Notion. We document things very well.
Right.
And yeah,
Nice. Where's the company based out of?
um, to be honest, I guess since there isn't actually a head office, there's, I guess,
Oh,
there's
there
not
really isn't a head
actually,
office
yeah.
at all. Okay.
Yeah, I mean on the invoices and stuff, you'll probably, it's, I think I stand to be corrected. I want to say the US, New York, but
Okay.
again, that may not be factual.
Sounds good. So, so what's the community like in Cape Town? I mean, are there a lot of Rails developers out there, or?
Yeah, they are. We used to have I want to say a well-known conference, because when I went to Rails World and a couple of other conferences, people have asked me about this conference. It's called Ruby Fusa.
Uh-huh.
And we ran it in South Africa for a couple of years, but we haven't run it, I think, since COVID. But there's a really big Ruby community here. There used to be a lot of meetups previously. I want to say that since COVID, that's sort of when things slowed down a little bit. I'm also not originally from Cape Town. I was living in Joburg, Johannesburg, and then
Hmm.
moved to Cape Town only like 5 years ago. Johannesburg also has a really big Ruby community. We used to have
Hmm.
constant meetups every couple of weeks. And yeah, it's really good. I will say though, because I work for a lot of I've over my career I've worked for a lot of US companies. My community tends to be more sort of global. I tend to attend conferences where I'm sort of traveling, and so it's been a little bit more difficult to keep in touch with the Rails community within Cape Town.
Hmm.
but I'd like to see Ruby Fuza hit the ground running again. That would be really
Yep.
cool.
That would be cool. Um, yeah. So, are there any other personal projects or anything else that you're working on, or is it mostly the Rails guides?
So between the Rails guides, and then I like to tinker on just personal projects. I've been trying to tinker with Arduinos and
Ooh,
connecting
fun.
that with sort of, yeah, it's really cool. I've really been enjoying it. I like seeing like the physical aspect of like things working. So I've been working
Mm-hmm.
on this like sort of with moisture detectors and sort of like like
Mm-hmm.
merging my passion for keeping my house plants alive together with like a little gardening system. So
Yep.
I've been tinkering with that and it's been really fun. But between writing code, the Rails guides, and then doing some of the tinkering, and then also speaking at conferences, I've been very busy over the last few
Mm-hmm.
months.
Yep.
My next conference is I'm really excited about is RubyConf Thailand, and that's
Oh,
next
wow.
year January. I'm one of the keynote speakers, so I'm really excited about that.
Oh, nice. That would be so fun.
Yeah, I've never been to Thailand as well, so
Yeah.
super excited about that.
Yeah. So, do you have any? I guess you've been on the conference circuit for a while. I think I went and looked at your website and it listed a whole bunch, and I was like, oh, wow, she's been to quite a few. Do you have any
Yeah.
advice for people who are thinking they want to speak at conferences? It seems like a lot of people decide they want to speak. They put in a CFP, and yeah, they get rejected at the first bunch, and then they give up. So,
Yeah, I think that I'd say just go for it. Like even if it feels scary at first, like I think if you have a passion for it and you want to do it, you should. I think the main thing that I have to say is you don't have to be an expert. You just need to be like curious and willing to share.
mm-hmm.
People sometimes assume that conference speakers know everything about a topic. That's not true. I very often I will put together a CFP about something that I know nothing about but want to learn more about. And those make for the most interesting talks. So, things that you're interested in, things that you may have learned that you think others might find useful. And especially, I find that the CFPs that have the most success rate, at least from my personal experience, is the CFPs that talk about that have a story that is something that you've experienced and you want to share with the world. So, for
Mm-hmm.
instance, my Rails World talk, Demystifying the Rails Codebase, that came from a storyline of being a technical writer and diving into the documentation and some of the difficulties that I experienced, and then sort of what I did in order to be able to learn how to demystify the Rails code base. So a
Mm-hmm.
lot of the time, it's things that you know you sorry things that you've experienced and you want to tell that story. I feel like writing an abstract first, even before you have like a full idea of the talk, that's okay. Sometimes people write their talks first, or
Mm-hmm.
they try to have every, not necessarily write their talks, but they try to have every aspect ironed out first before you're submitting. They feel that they need to know
Right.
everything before submitting. You really don't have to. It just needs to be a pitch, and then just ensure that you have enough time before the conference talk, of course, and then you can learn on the way.
Right.
Yeah. And start small and then grow. So if you've never spoken before, a good opportunity. I remember when I started talking, the first kind of places that I submitted my talks to were like local Rails communities, that meetups that I went to,
Mm-hmm.
and I would talk there. I would get a little bit more confident in front of people. I would get feedback on a talk, and then I started applying to the bigger ones. And that way you can also put in your CFPs that like, hey, I have spoken at these different communities. I have experience speaking, things like that.
Yep. Makes sense. All right. Well,
Yeah.
I think I'm going to start leading us toward the end of the show and picks. But before we do that, like, where do people find you if they're looking for you on the internet and they want to connect?
So you can find me on Twitter. What do we call it? X. It's been a few years, but I still say Twitter.
I still call it Twitter.
You can find me on X. My username is Ridhwana_K. My name has a silent H, so it's RIDHWANA_K. You can find me on LinkedIn as well. Sometimes I post there. My username is Ridwana, and but mostly on X.
Very cool. All right. Well, let's go ahead and do the picks then. I'll start it out and just kind of show you how we do it, and then you can shout out about whatever you want. So the first pick that I have is it's a board game, and I almost always do a board game of some kind. If I haven't played anything new, I'll just pick one that I like, that I've played, that I've probably picked before. But we played a new one yesterday with my... So I play board games every Wednesday night with my friends. And we played a game called Colt Express. And it's a train robbery game. Board Game Geek weights it at 1.84, which is kind of... So 2 is what is about where I tell people the casual gamers are kind of going to go, okay, this was a little bit complicated, but not so complicated that I didn't like it, and it was fun, right? A 1 is like the games you play with your kids, right? So, you know, and so it's got enough to it to where there's some competition and stuff. And some of the ones are really fun, right? There's simple dynamics, and you just... But anyway, so this one's a 1.84, so it's almost a 2. It's called Colt Express, and it plays 2 to 6 players. My friend has the Colt Express Big Box Edition, which has 2 of the expansions in it. So his will play up to 9, and apparently there's another expansion that adds another player or 2 as well. So you can play with a lot of people. It came out in 2014, and what it is it actually has little train cars that you put together for your game board. And so you have the locomotive, and then you have one train car per player, and there's loot on the floor of the train cars. And so then what you wind up doing is you have a deck of cards, and the cards allow you to shoot at the other players. You can punch the other players. You can move up to the roof of the car or back into the main part of the car, and you can move across the car. So you move from one car to the next. And there's a marshal, and if you wind up in the car with the marshal, then he shoots you, and you move to the roof of the car, because the marshal doesn't go on the roof. And so then the rest of it is and then you can pick up loot. You can move the marshal. I think that's it. So if you shoot another player, you put the shot card in their deck, right? And it's a no-op card. So it dilutes their deck. It makes it harder for them to get what they want. If you punch a player, then you make them drop a piece of loot. Picking up loot's worth anywhere from $250 to $500. There are gems that are worth $500, and there's a lock box or a strong box on the locomotive where the marshal starts that's worth $1,000. And so you just move around the train and try and get as much money as possible in 5 turns. And the way you play the turn is whoever's first, they put a card on the pile, and then you go around the circle, and everyone else plays a card, right? And so you can see what they're playing on the turns where you play face up, but there's sometimes there are twists where you go around the circle the other direction, right? And so you may get, if you're first, it doesn't change a lot for you, but if you're last and it changes the direction, you get to play, the first player plays, and then you get to play again. And so, that may change the dynamics. There's others where you play them face down. So for those cards on that round, you don't see what the other players did, so you can't react to it. There's another where you play 2 cards at a time, and so you play twice, right? And so you can move and then pick up loot because you know that you're going to be able to get there before anyone else, or you move and you punch another player or make them drop loot because you know that they're going to be there. And then if you shoot the most shots, then you get $1,000. So anyway, then you tally it all up at the end, and anyway, it was a lot of fun. So and the game board is really unique because it's actually a train that you just set up on the table. And so I mean it's real small, but anyway, it was a lot of fun. Really, really enjoyed that. It took us about an hour and 15 minutes to play, but we were learning how to play. So I think you could probably play it. We played it with 5 people. We probably play it in 45 minutes, I think. So anyway, very, very fun. So I'm going to pick Colt Express. And then I'm going to shout out about a few others. So yesterday we had a team lunch with my team. And basically we got sent gift cards for DoorDash, right? So I had food show up at my house. And then we played Wiki Race, and that's at wiki-race.com. And the way that Wiki Race works is you could put in your own things that you start at and end at, but it starts you on a page on Wikipedia, and then you have to click links to get to the other page, right? And so one of the ones we played, it was like some soccer player from like the 1950s that there were probably like 4 links that went there, right? And so and I can't remember where we started at, but it was something like completely weird, right? And so you start figuring out some of the tricks, right? Where it's okay, well, I know this guy's from England, and so I'm gonna get to England, right? And so I click some of the links that take me to the world, and then countries, and then England, right? And then I know he played on these teams, so I go to the soccer leagues, and then England, right? And so anyway, it's very, very fun, and it's basically a race. So whoever gets there first wins. And then when somebody wins, it shows their progression through Wikipedia. There was one that we got that everybody eventually just gave up on. So it is possible to get some that just are hard to figure out. I'm sure. I'm not sure it was possible. I just think it was really, really, really tough to figure that one out. But anyway, it was really fun. And they pick some really obscure Wikipedia articles sometimes, and so that's fun too, because part of the game that we figured out pretty fast was okay, the first step to figuring out how to complete this chain is to open another tab in my browser and go look up the thing that I'm trying to get to, because I have no idea who this person is or what this thing is, right? And so you go look it up, and it's like, oh, it's a plant in South America. Right. All right. So, then you start figuring it out. So anyway, tons of fun. And so I'm going to pick Wiki Race, and then I'm just trying to think through things, because there was something else I wanted to pick and I can't remember what it was. But anyway, I'll just save it for next time. Do you have some stuff you want to shout out about?
Yeah, those were very cool. I'm very into games, and so I'm definitely going to check them out. So a problem that I've been having recently is just being able to, I guess, document meetings a little bit better. So having to write down notes from every meeting and then consolidate it all together has been a really big pet peeve of mine. That's very tiring and sometimes really unnecessary to have to take things from different places and then put it together. So I've been looking for a good tool that will be able to help me a little bit with note taking, especially with AI and its advancements. So recently I've been exploring a few of these. So the one that I've been using has been crisp.ai. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's basically a an AI assistant for collaborative meetings. So some of the team meetings will basically enable Crisp, and it does recording if you wanted to, or it can do transcribing. So it will give you the entire sort of transcribed version as well as the audio recording of the meeting. But that's not the coolest part. The coolest part is that it will give you a summary, it will give you the action items from the meeting, it will give you a detailed outline if you ask it to. But then also it has this AI chat that is attached to sort of every meeting once it's been uploaded. And with the AI chat, you can get pretty specific. So if there's a specific part of the meeting that you want to dive into, you can just ask the AI chat to summarize or detail certain parts of the meeting, which is really nice. Sometimes the output of a meeting is I have specific questions and I just want to summarize these summarize the meeting and answer these by answering these specific questions. And so I just go in and I like put in the questions in the AI chat, and it will basically spit out the solutions that we came up with in the meeting. So really, really cool. I've been exploring that against a different AI tool, which is Granola AI. And that's like an AI notepad for people in meetings. So the difference being is that Crisp will transcribe the entire meeting and potentially if you wanted to record as well, whereas Granola will simply just provide you with sort of notes for the meeting. So it will take your raw meeting notes and make them into something more legible. So both those tools have been pretty interesting, and I found that it's made meetings a lot easier, especially like team meetings where we're making big decisions and I just want to summarize it. I also find myself sometimes so focused on taking notes that I'm not processing what someone's saying in real time. So the fact that I can just give my notes over to a tool and let the tool handle the note taking and I can be present and process what people are saying makes it a lot easier and a lot more efficient for me personally.
Nice. So one thing I'm going to clarify for folks: Crisp AI is spelled with a K. It took me a second to find it.
Yes.
But yeah, very cool. Very, very cool. All right. Well, I don't think there's anything else, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. Thank you for coming. This was fun.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. And I hope that you will end up visiting Cape Town one day because it really is beautiful.
Yeah, I have to admit. So I'm going to leave this on the recording, but I'm curious. I'll just bring it up. So my wife is a huge Shark Week person, right? So every year in the summer, Discovery Channel does Shark Week, and they have a ton of documentaries out in Cape Town, right, where they have the sharks jumping out of the water, or they're just out there kind of filming them doing their thing, and chasing seals and whatever. And then sometimes they do show part of the town or at least the coast, and it just looks amazing. It just looks like, oh wow, this would be a really cool place to visit. And I don't know that I would necessarily want to go out on a boat looking for sharks, but I think it'd be a blast. And I have to say that my wife, after watching some of these shows, she might be the one going,
Yeah.
I want to go out on the boat looking for sharks.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, there's other animals that you can go out looking for, like
Yeah.
dolphins, and we have a penguin beach called Boulders Beach where you can
Oh,
interact
there
with
you
the
go.
penguins. Yeah, you can interact with the fun, cute ones.
Yeah. So what's the best part of living in Cape Town? I'm just curious.
I think nature. The nature is the
Uh-huh.
best part. It's along the coast. It's absolutely gorgeous. There's this drive called Chapman's Peak, if you look it up on the
Mhm.
internet. It's just beautiful scenery along the coast. On the one side, you're seeing the sea on the other side, you're seeing the mountains, and it's just absolutely gorgeous. We have Table Mountain, which, I mean, based on the name, it's
Mhm.
basically like a tabletop. There's lots of hiking opportunities in Cape Town. There's a lot of if you're an outdoor person, there's a lot of things to do. Lots of like diving, swimming, lots of long drives, lots of good sunset views. And I think people here are just very relaxed and laid
Mhm.
back. I will say that took me a long time to get used to. I'm 5 years in Cape Town and I'm still not used to that, because from Johannesburg, we're very like hustle and very serious about
Right.
things. And Cape Town is just a vibe. That's the way I can describe it, a very chilled vibe.
Mhm.
So yeah, lots of fun things to do in Cape Town. People are very friendly as well. I find South Africa to be one of like the friendliest people around. Like you'll walk in the street and you'll say hello to people and you'll smile at them. Not every city is like that
Right.
in the world, but South Africans are really friendly people.
Nice. So I think a lot of people, if they pay attention to South Africa, they've probably heard of Cape Town. I think most
Yeah,
people are. I think Johannesburg's the biggest city in South Africa, and
yeah.
so yeah. I mean, how accessible is it? I'm assuming you have direct flights in and out of there because it's not a small city, but
Yeah, so my family lives in Johannesburg. So I basically fly up to Johannesburg. I want to say every 4 to 6 weeks to see them and just
oh
spend some
wow.
time with them. It helps that I work remotely, so it means
Hmm.
that I'm just able to work out of any of the city.
Right.
My husband's family stays in Durban, so we fly in and out of Durban pretty often as well. Yeah, it's very easy to get to the different cities, and each city offers something different. So Cape Town is, I don't know if you know this, but Cape Town has a part of Cape Town, and we call it Cape of Good Hope or Cape Point. It's where the
Hmm.
Atlantic and the Indian Ocean meet.
Right.
And so you can actually see at some points of the year where you can see like the different colors of the ocean and they sort of meeting at that point. It's really beautiful. But unfortunately, you're not really able. Or I personally don't swim in the ocean here. The Atlantic Ocean is really cold, and
Yeah.
just not for me. But if you travel to Durban, that's the Indian Ocean, and the Indian Ocean
Uh-huh.
is just beautifully warm and really nice to swim in. So very often we'd hop over to Durban and go swimming at the beach and things like that. And then in Johannesburg, you'd mostly like do a lot of shopping there. There's a lot of big
Hmm.
buildings, a lot of corporates there as well. So higher earning potential, a lot of people that are just very busy doing things, a lot of good takeouts. Yeah, and just a lot of shopping malls. And then we have the
Right.
Kruger National Park as well. So if you want to see what we call the Big Five in South Africa, which is the lion, leopard, elephant, rhino, and buffalo, you'd basically go to Kruger National Park and you could do a safari and see them. No, we do not have animals walking around the streets of South Africa. I know sometimes I get asked that question.
Oh
No,
really?
that's not the case. I mean, sometimes we have had a tiger on the loose once or twice, but not on a daily basis. So yeah, really good safaris as well. Lots of very cool things to do.
Cool. Very cool. All right. Well, I'll stop asking you questions about South Africa, but thanks for coming. This was awesome.
No problem. I had so much fun. Thank you for inviting me.